Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Wilhelm Scream, and welcome back to another day in Destiny 2 for some more Destiny 2 news and the Final Shape / Echoes intel. And in today's video, I'm going to be running you through this week's Nightfall and GM Nightfall, which is the Warden of Nothing strike. An old school strike. We haven't seen this one in quite some time, and in fact, this one is so old that its initial location, which was the Tangled Shore, no longer exists, and this strike is now located in the Dreaming City if you wanted to just run it normally. Thank you for all of those who let me know on my last video, as I was a little bit confused as where you could actually find it nowadays. But like I said, we're going to be running you through this on the GM difficulty, but all the strategies, tips, tricks, cheeses, and glitches that we will be using in this video will all work if you are a solo player or running this on the lower level difficulties, or if you're a solo player running it on the GM difficulty. And in fact, the final glitch that we're going to be sharing with you for the boss, I think, will be essential, especially if you are trying to do this as a solo player on GM and you're not that god tier esoteric level player. Shout out to Esoteric. Also, a big shout out to my buddies DJ and Sinister for helping me out with this gameplay. You're actually seeing the gameplay from Sinister's perspective, so if you're used to seeing my videos on a Warlock, you're up for a little bit of a change today. You're going to be seeing it on a Hunter, which is probably a bit more difficult, I have to say. So again, big shout out to Sinister and a big shout out to DJ. I will be linking their Twitch streams also on the top pinned comment of today's video. We'll probably be doing some live streaming on both of their channels later, possibly doing a raid. So if you're interested in checking out a live stream with myself and those that I play with, make sure to tune in later. Now, most of the strategy for this particular strike is fairly straightforward, and I'm sure a few people know a few of these things, most notably for the train section. Definitely stay on the top of the rails. This is kind of a straightforward little trick that may go, unknown by people who haven't run this strike a million times in the past, like all us veteran players have been. Overall, I would say that this is maybe a B+ level strike as far as difficulty. It's certainly not going to be one of the more difficult ones that you're going to do. The boss can be a bit annoying and is probably the place where if you have the right strategy, it's very easy. If you have the wrong strategy, it's very difficult. The most difficult part of this particular strike is going to be the prison section, where you actually have to disable the bombs. And that is going to require a very specific strategy, I think, in order to get through it as least damage as possible. So if you are in a group running this in a GM difficulty, expect to take at least a couple of deaths there, but if you can get through that section with only a couple of deaths, you're doing very good. For the first little mini-boss area, I would suggest stay on this side of the stairs until you take out the barrier champions, as well as the little mini-boss, well, not the little mini-boss, but this guy over there, the Hydra. The Hydra doesn't do that much damage, but it can be annoying when you're trying to take out the barrier champions, as barrier champions still shoot you, and you're going to have two of them shooting you at the same time. And if you take one shot from the barrier champions and then you get knocked by a little bit of the splash damage from the Hydra, you're going to die. So take out the Hydra first, as you can take out the Hydra from really far back, especially if you're using pulse rifles, which I would recommend for this, just because of the anti-barrier and the range. You can shoot right through the Hydra's shields. Rockets are also the damage bonus for this week's GM, so I used Apex Predator with Bipod for one run, but then I used Dragon's Breath for another run, and Dragon's Breath actually seemed to do really, really well. Bring a Peace Bond if you like a sidearm, as it's all three champions in this, and I would actually say that the Unstop were a little bit more difficult to take out than the Overload, though we did have one Overload at the end that we sort of had to stun lock in order to do the glitch that we wanted to do for the boss, but I'll cover that a little bit more when we get to it. Once you clear out those 2 barrier champions and the Hydra, this is actually a fairly straightforward area. You'll have the mini boss, but if you've been saving a super, this is a good time to use it on the mini boss just to clear this section quickly. Also remember, if you're a little tentative around where the trains come out, you can always just jump over the top of the train tracks here. This is the spot where usually you want to stay in order to do damage to this mini boss. You have the shielding to your left. The mini boss will come through the door and then warp to the middle and then warp back to the left. So it's sort of the spot where you have both the best vantage point as well as the best cover from the ads spawning as well as the boss. But overall, the damage that this particular mini boss takes is very small, especially in compared to the boss. You can clear this section really quick. I actually died on this run, but for the most part what I would do is I would usually just use my super, and like I said, you could clear this room fairly quick. But now on to the area which I think is going to give people the most trouble, and is definitely the area where you have to have the most coordination with your teammates. So once you come into the area where you're going to be defusing the bombs, the real prison section, you'll have a whole bunch of champions. Stay on this side to take out that first wave of them. You're going to have 3 barriers, I believe. I think there's an unstop and an overload. Make sure you don't get rushed from the overload, as they can kind of warp close to you on this side, and really the only one that will come down this little hill. The barriers will all stay on the opposite side and are the easiest to take out. Usually we would start off taking out that overload or those 2 barriers and then take out the unstop and the last barrier. But then once you actually start the section where the bombs warp in, what you want to do is take out this barrier that spawns in on the right first, and you want to do this as quickly as possible. So have one of your teammates stay on the plate A usually, and have 2 or at least 1 supering take out that barrier on the right first. Now as soon as you do that, there's going to be another, I believe it's an unstop, that warps in directly to your right. You can see us fighting it in the tunnel to your left of the vantage point of Sin here. It's okay if you die to take out both of these champions, because once they're gone, you can really make a lot of progress. Once that barrier champion is gone, and then once the overload, I believe it's an overload, or excuse me, it might be an unstop, is gone, but those 2 champions that initially spawn in, you can really take the B bomb to your leisure. A will already be done, as they'll sort of be locked in that corner while your teammates are taking out the A bomb, and then everybody can just rush C. And you can sacrifice your lives here if you need it, throw supers if you need it, but once the bomb is defused, of course, all the enemies should disappear. So then you'll just have the last phase where you have to take out the mini boss in this section, which again you can do from range and is not the most difficult portion of this whole area. It's going to be really make it or break it in that first right corner when that barrier champion spawns in. Should be a hobgoblin, and then there will be a another one that spawns in right down the tunnel that is going to charge you. Once those are dead, you should be good to go. So don't be afraid to burn Prismatic, which is what I was using, or burn a super in that right corner just to take out those champions, and should be all good for this section. For the boss, you can kind of hang out over here on the left side. You can even use, I believe there's a Scorch Cannon, but shouldn't give you too much trouble. Another little thing I like to note is for this area where you have to go down the elevator, just make sure you send one person down first, and then I would suggest sending one person down at a time, because this is a spot where you can accidentally die if you send too many people down at once. Also, don't emote. Even though DJ was emoting here, don't emote. He got lucky, but occasionally, especially if you're in too small a group or too tight a group, emoting will kill you. So you don't want to waste any lives, and then somebody will be a ghost up top sometimes. So usually it's good to just have one person remain up top until 2 people are down. And then once you're down, you can stay on this platform and take out this initial set of champions. Leave one because you kind of want to keep at least one enemy alive. Sometimes you can even keep, there's I think it's just a normal red bar Vex down there alive, so that you can get to the spot that we're going to do for the boss, or use for the boss. Now, in a group of 3, even at GM, you can still do a lot of damage to the boss in one wave. So some people, I'm sure, will say, I would rather just stay at the bottom and nuke the boss as the boss comes in. Now, that is one strategy, but if you don't nuke the boss and you don't all get to cover, you're going to have another group of adds spawn in, and then you're in trouble. So unless you're confident that you can nuke the boss as soon as they spawn in, this strategy, I think, is going to be the safest and best used method, especially if you're a solo player doing this on any level difficulty. So just keep that in mind. If you're not confident in a boss nuke, this will make this whole area much simpler. Now, of course, we're still not in the glitch spot. We're just taking out the champions first. We're going to save one of the champions. And then once we get down to the bottom, we're going to stun lock this champion. And we're going to jump up to this point, which you can clamber on, and then out of the map onto this tank. And there's several of these tanks that surround the outside perimeter of the map. Now, once you're here, you can take out that last champion. The boss will spawn in, and you'll be able to take out the boss at your leisure from this vantage point. There is a couple of things to note. One, if you jump too high, or if you kind of get to the wrong place, you can see there's a joining allies, but usually that can be avoided or just nullified by moving forward slightly or crouching. The boss can hit you up here if you're in direct line of sight of the boss, but usually, again, if you just crouch or move to the back of one of these tanks a little bit, you should be out of line of sight. You can also jump to the roof directly across from where you see us standing here, and also hang out there if you need another vantage point. This is where rockets really came in handy, and when I was using the Dragon's Breath versus the Apex Predator, just because of the way Dragon's Breath works with the constant debuff and the bleed effect from the dot that it gives, when you couple that with any weapon that has Vorpal on it, so say you shot the boss with Dragon's Breath and then you switch to a weapon that has Vorpal, that bleed goes even longer. And the only thing that you might run into as an issue from this point is the boss does sort of warp around the arena a little bit, and occasionally you'll get some spawns of adds that come in. You have to take them out before the boss comes back over to this corner. But if you can beat them in the first 2 waves, this whole area you can get through in just a matter of minutes. So that's why I suggest just bring something that will do a bit of damage to the boss in a big spurt, and then also might do damage over time to the boss as they warp around the arena, because the more damage you do to them when they're not directly underneath you, like you see here, the more they'll come back to this side. So I would shoot with Dragon's Breath, swap the weapon with Vorpal. Even if the boss warped, it would eventually warp back quicker because I was continually doing damage to them even though they weren't in my line of sight. There might be a few waves of adds that you have to take out, but overall you won't have any trouble with them. You'll be completely a line of sight of all the adds and really any of the major boss damage. Though you still can get hit, but if you're being careful, and of course if you have teammates, your orbs will always respawn up here. So they'll never actually go down to the boss arena again, and you can just take pot shots at the boss like you see us doing. And that is going to be it for all the information in today's video. Hopefully you found something in this video helpful. Remember, this week's weapon from the GM Nightfall is the Adept version of the Shadow Price. Good Auto Rifle comes with some new perks, I believe, in its loot pool, or in its pool, perk pool. So definitely worth checking out. If you've watched to this point in the video, you can leave a hashtag The Final Shape or a hashtag Echoes or a hashtag Sinister or a hashtag DJ in the comments section down below for another entry into the next giveaway for this video. Remember, we do one every 1,000 subscribers on this channel, so you never want to miss out. And when we reach 100,000 subscribers, we'll be giving away an Xbox Series X or a video card if you play on PC. Thanks so much for watching once more, and of course, I am Wilhelm Scream. We will see you next time.